I didn't believe the rule at first. Nobody ever does. Not really. It's the kind of thing people repeat like it's folklore, like it belongs in the same category as knocking on wood or not stepping on cracks. Harmless, superstitious, easy to ignore. That's what I thought anyway when I first heard it. Don't stare at the face on the moon after midnight. It was written on a piece of paper taped to the inside of the cabin door. Not even neatly either. The handwriting looked rushed, uneven, like whoever wrote it didn't want to spend too long thinking about the words they were putting down. I remember laughing when I saw it. Actually laughing, out loud. The sound echoed a little in the empty cabin, which should have been my first clue that something about the place wasn't right. The listing hadn't mentioned anything about rules. It was supposed to be a quiet getaway, 3 nights in a remote cabin, miles away from the nearest town, surrounded by forests so dense it looked like a dark green ocean from above. No neighbors, no traffic, no noise, just me, my laptop, and a chance to finally finish a project I'd been putting off for months. That was the plan. Isolation, but the good kind. The kind you choose. The owner had been weirdly vague, though. That part I remembered clearly. All communication had been through short, clipped messages. No small talk. No friendly recommendations. Just instructions. How to get there. Where the key would be. When to leave. At the time, I chalked it up to someone who didn't like people very much. Now I think it was something else entirely. The road to the cabin was worse than I expected. Not just unpaved, but barely there at all. My car scraped against branches more than once, and at one point I was sure I'd taken a wrong turn, because the path narrowed so much it felt like I was driving into the woods instead of through them. But then the trees opened up just enough, and I saw it. The cabin stood alone in a clearing, tilted slightly to one side, like it had settled unevenly over the years. It didn't look abandoned, but it didn't look lived in either. The windows were dark. No lights, no movement, just a structure sitting quietly under a sky that was already beginning to dim. I remember thinking it looked smaller in person. Inside, it was cleaner than I expected. Sparse, but not neglected. A couch, a table, a bed in the corner, and a small kitchen area with just enough supplies to get by. Everything had that faint smell of wood and dust, like it hadn't been used in a while, but was still maintained just enough to pass inspection. That's when I saw the paper on the door. Don't stare at the face on the moon after midnight. There was nothing else written on it. No explanation, no signature, just that one sentence. I actually checked the rest of the cabin, half expecting to find more notes. Maybe a list of rules, like you see in those online stories. Don't go into the basement. Don't answer the door after dark. That kind of thing. But there was nothing else. Just the one. It felt incomplete. I shrugged it off and got settled in. Unpacked my bag, set up my laptop, even made myself something to eat. Normal things. Grounding things. The kind of routine that makes a new place feel less unfamiliar. For a while, it worked. The quiet became comfortable. The isolation stopped feeling like isolation and started feeling like peace. By the time night fully settled in, I'd almost forgotten about the note entirely. Almost. It came back to me when I noticed how bright the moon was. I wasn't even looking for it. I just happened to glance out the window while stretching, and there it was, hanging low in the sky, larger than I'd ever seen it before. Not just bright, but sharp. The kind of clarity you don't get in the city. Every crater and shadow stood out like it had been etched into the surface. It was striking. I stood there for a minute, just looking at it, not thinking about anything in particular, just appreciating the view. It felt calm, peaceful even, the kind of moment that makes you forget everything else for a while. Then I remembered the note. Don't stare at the face on the moon after midnight. I checked the time. 10:47 p.m. I smiled to myself, a little amused, a little curious. The idea that someone would leave a warning like that felt almost theatrical, like they were trying to create an atmosphere. Maybe it was part of the rental experience, a gimmick, something to make the stay more memorable. If that was the case, it was working. I looked back at the moon, this time a little more deliberately, searching. A face. That's what the note had said. At first, I didn't see anything, just the usual patterns of light and shadow. But the longer I looked, the more my brain started trying to make sense of it. Connecting shapes, filling in gaps. It's a natural thing. Humans are wired to recognize faces, even where there aren't any. And then, slowly, I started to see it. Two darker patches like eyes. A curved line beneath them that could be a mouth. It wasn't perfect, not clear, but it was enough. Enough that once you saw it, you couldn't really unsee it. I let out a quiet breath, somewhere between a laugh and something else I couldn't quite place. Okay, I said to no one in particular. That's a little creepy, but not scary. Not yet. 10:52 p.m. Plenty of time before midnight. I turned away from the window and went back to my laptop, trying to focus on work. But the image stuck with me. That vague, almost face staring down from the sky. The longer I sat there, the more aware I became of the window behind me, of the fact that if I turned around, it would still be there, watching. I shook my head, annoyed with myself. It was just a trick of the light, a pattern, nothing more. Still, I found myself glancing at the clock more often than usual. 11:13 p.m., 11:28 p.m., 11:41 p.m. Each time, the thought came back a little stronger. Don't stare at the face on the moon after midnight. By the time it was 11:57, I'd stopped pretending I wasn't curious. I stood up slowly, almost without realizing it, and walked back to the window. The moon was higher now, brighter, clearer. The face was easier to see. And this time, I didn't have to look for it. It was already looking at me. For a second, I just stood there, trying to convince myself nothing had changed. It was still the same moon, same sky, same quiet stretch of trees surrounding the cabin. If anything, the night had grown calmer, like the world itself was holding still. No wind, no rustling leaves, no distant sounds of animals moving through the forest. Just silence, thick and complete. And yet the longer I looked, the harder it became to ignore the feeling creeping up the back of my neck. The face looked clearer, not sharper exactly, not like it had suddenly gained detail, but more defined in a way that didn't make sense, like my brain wasn't filling in the gaps anymore. Like it didn't have to. I checked the time. 11:59 p.m., 1 minute. I told myself I'd look away before midnight. Just a quick glance, just enough to satisfy the curiosity that had been building for the last hour. That was all. Then I'd close the curtains, forget about the stupid note, and go to bed. Simple. I kept my eyes on the clock on my laptop screen, watching the seconds tick forward in the reflection of the window. 11:59:12, 11:59:27, 11:59:43. My chest felt tight, though I couldn't say why. 11:59:58, 11:59:59, 12 a.m. Nothing happened. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding and shook my head, almost laughing again. Of course nothing happened. It was a note on a door in the middle of nowhere, probably left there by someone with too much time on their hands and a weird sense of humor. Yeah, I muttered. Real scary. I turned away from the window. That should have been the end of it, but something stopped me. It wasn't a sound. Not exactly. More like the absence of one. The kind of silence that feels deliberate, like it's waiting for something. I frowned and glanced back over my shoulder. The moon hadn't moved, but the face, The face was different. The mouth, if that's what it was, had shifted. It wasn't the vague curve I'd seen before. It was lower now, straighter. Not quite a frown, but not neutral either. Something unfinished. My stomach dropped. "That's not possible," I said under my breath. I stepped closer to the window, squinting slightly, as if that would help. As if there was some logical explanation I was just missing. A trick of the atmosphere. Clouds. Light distortion. Anything. But there were no clouds, and the face didn't blur or shift when I blinked. If anything, it settled, like it had found its place. A slow, creeping unease spread through me, the kind that doesn't spike all at once, but builds steadily, layer by layer. My brain kept trying to rationalize it, to reduce it to something harmless, but that effort was starting to feel forced. I became aware of my reflection in the glass. Faint, barely visible against the brightness of the moon, but it was there. My face, superimposed over the one in the sky. For a moment, they lined up, and I felt a sharp, involuntary jolt of fear. I stepped back immediately, breaking the alignment. "Okay," I said, louder this time. "That's enough." I reached for the curtain and pulled it shut, cutting off the view entirely. The fabric fell into place with a soft, final sound that seemed much louder in the silence. There. Problem solved. Out of sight, out of mind. I stood there for a few seconds, staring at the closed curtain, waiting for the feeling to pass, waiting for my heartbeat to slow down. It didn't, not right away, but it started to. Gradually. I turned away and walked back toward the table, each step feeling a little more normal than the last. By the time I sat down, I could almost convince myself I'd overreacted. Almost. Then I heard it. A soft tap. I froze. It came from the window. Just one. Light. Almost polite. I waited. Nothing. I let out a slow breath and rubbed my face, trying to shake off the tension. Old cabins make noise. Wood expands, contracts. Branches hit the glass. It happens. Another tap. Slightly louder this time. My eyes drifted toward the curtain despite myself. "Wind," I said quietly. But the trees outside hadn't been moving. I knew that. I stayed where I was, forcing myself not to react, not to feed into it. If I ignored it, it would stop. That's how these things work. Your mind plays tricks on you, and the more attention you give them, the worse they get. Silence. A full minute passed. Then, tap, tap. Two in quick succession. My jaw tightened. "That's not funny," I muttered, though I wasn't sure who I was talking to anymore. I stood up slowly. Every instinct told me to leave the curtain closed, to get as far away from that window as possible, and not look back until morning. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. It doesn't care about instincts. It doesn't care about warnings scribbled on paper. It just wants answers. I took a step toward the window, then another. The air felt colder the closer I got, though that didn't make sense either. There was no draft, nothing that should have changed the temperature inside the cabin. Tap, right in front of me now, on the other side of the curtain. I hesitated, my hand hovering just inches from the fabric. "This is stupid," I whispered, and then I pulled it aside. The window was empty. No branches, no animals, no explanation, just the clearing, bathed in pale moonlight. And the moon itself, hanging impossibly still in the sky. The face was unmistakable now, clear, defined, and unmistakably frowning. I felt something in my chest twist, sharp and sudden. "No," I said, the word coming out before I could stop it. The face didn't move, but I had the distinct, overwhelming sense that it had changed because of me. Because I looked. A faint sound reached my ears, not from outside, from behind me. A slow, deliberate creak, like wood shifting under weight. I turned, every muscle in my body tensing at once. The cabin looked the same, but it didn't feel the same. The air was heavier now, thicker, like something unseen had settled into the space. pressing in from all sides. Another creak, closer this time, from somewhere deeper inside the cabin. I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "I'm not alone," I said, the realization forming as the words left my mouth. And as if in response, something in the darkness moved. I didn't see it clearly at first. Just a shift in the dark, subtle enough that my brain tried to dismiss it as a trick of the light. The cabin only had a single lamp on near the table, and beyond that, everything faded into soft shadows. It would have been easy, normal even, to assume my eyes were playing catch-up after staring out into the brightness of the moon. But the movement happened again. Slow, deliberate, and definitely not imagined. Every part of me locked up. My body didn't know whether to run or stay still, so it chose neither. I just stood there, halfway between the window and the center of the room, staring into the dim space near the hallway that led to the bedroom. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. My voice sounded wrong, too loud at first, then swallowed too quickly by the silence that followed. No echo, no response, just that same heavy stillness pressing in from all sides. Another creak, closer now. I took a step back without thinking, my heel scraping lightly against the wooden floor. The sound seemed to carry farther than it should have, sharp and out of place. "Okay," I said, quieter this time. "Not funny." Still nothing. Then, a shape shifted at the edge of the hallway, not fully stepping into the light, not revealing itself, just enough movement to confirm that something was there, watching. My pulse started hammering in my ears, each beat louder than the last. I felt it in my throat, my chest, even in my fingertips. The rational part of my mind scrambled for explanations. Maybe the owner came back. Maybe someone followed me. Maybe... The thought broke off as the shape moved again. Forward. Into the light. It wasn't a person. Not exactly. The height was right. The general outline was right. But the proportions were off. Subtly wrong in ways that became more obvious the longer I looked. Its arms hung too long. Its shoulders too narrow. Its head tilted at an angle that no neck should comfortably allow. And its face, my stomach dropped. It didn't have one. Not in any normal sense. Where features should have been, there was only a smooth, pale surface, but not blank, not empty. There were indentations. Faint at first, like impressions pressed into soft material from the inside. Two shallow dips where eyes might be. A longer curve where a mouth could form. And as I watched, they deepened, slowly, deliberately, like something beneath the surface was pushing outward, trying to shape itself into something recognizable. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "No, no." The thing took another step forward. The floor creaked under its weight. That was the worst part. The sound. It meant it was real. Not a hallucination, not a trick of the light. Something physical. Something that existed in the same space as me, following the same rules. Except it clearly wasn't. Its face continued to form, the indentations growing more pronounced with each second. The curve of the mouth sharpened, and I recognized it. It was the same face, the one on the moon. Only now, it was closer, much closer. A cold wave of understanding hit me all at once, so sudden it almost knocked the breath out of me. Don't stare at the face on the moon after midnight. It wasn't a warning about seeing something. It was a warning about being seen. The thing tilted its head further, the almost face stretching slightly as if testing the shape. The mouth, if it was a mouth, twitched upward for just a second before settling back into that same unnatural downward curve. A frown. My frown. The one I had looked at. The one I had acknowledged. I started, my voice breaking. I didn't mean to. The thing took another step, then another. Each movement slow, unhurried, like it had all the time in the world. I stumbled back, my mind finally catching up with what my body had known from the start. Run. I turned and bolted for the door, my shoulder slamming into it harder than I intended. My hands fumbled with the lock for a split second that felt like an eternity, before it finally gave. I threw the door open and rushed outside, the cold night air hitting me like a shock. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I just ran, my feet pounding against the dirt, my breath coming in sharp, uneven bursts. The clearing stretched out in front of me, open and exposed. Anything was better than being inside that cabin. Behind me, nothing. No footsteps, no avaz, no pursuit. That should have comforted me. It didn't, because the silence felt wrong. Like it wasn't chasing me, because it didn't need to. I slowed after a few seconds, my lungs already burning from the sudden sprint. The edge of the tree line loomed ahead, dark and dense, offering either cover or something worse. I stopped, turned. The cabin stood exactly where I'd left it. Door hanging open, lights still on inside. Empty. Too empty. There's no way, I muttered, shaking my head. There's no way, it's just gone. As if responding to that thought, something shifted in the doorway. A silhouette. Tall, still, watching me. Even from this distance, I could feel it. That same pressure, that same awareness. My eyes drifted upward without meaning to the moon. I shouldn't have looked. I knew that, but I did. The face was still there, still frowning, but now it was lower, closer to the horizon than it should have been, and somehow closer to me. A faint sound reached my ears, not from the cabin, not from the trees, from above. A low, dragging whisper, like something massive moving through the sky without disturbing the air. My breath hitched. "That's not possible," I said, though the words felt useless now. Nothing about this was possible. The light in the clearing shifted slightly, shadows stretching in ways that didn't match any natural source. I could feel it. Before I fully understood it, something was descending. Not physically, not in a way I could measure, but in presence, in weight, in attention, and it was focused entirely on me. The thing in the doorway took a single step forward. At the exact same moment, the face on the moon twitched. The twitch was small. So small, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. A subtle shift along the curve of the mouth, like a muscle tightening beneath skin that shouldn't exist. But the moon doesn't have muscles. It doesn't move like that. It doesn't react. Except it just had. And the thing standing in the doorway, it mirrored the movement exactly. That's when the last piece clicked into place. They weren't separate. They were the same. My chest tightened so sharply, it felt like something inside me had snapped. Every instinct screamed at me to look away, to break whatever connection had formed. But it was already too late. I had seen it. Really seen it. Not just shapes and shadows, but intention. And now it knew I understood. The figure stepped fully out of the cabin. Its body didn't move like a person walking. It was smoother than that, less restricted, like it wasn't bound by joints or muscles, just mimicking the idea of them. Each step carried it forward without effort, its long arms swaying slightly at its sides. Its face was complete now, two hollow, sunken eyes. A long, thin mouth pulled into a deep, unnatural frown. My frown. The one I had looked at. The one I had accepted. I stumbled backward, my heel catching on uneven ground, as panic fully took over. "Stay back," I said, the words trembling as they left me. "Just stay the hell back." It didn't respond. It didn't need to. It just kept coming. Above us, the whispering sound grew louder. I forced my gaze upward again, against every warning screaming in my head. The moon was wrong. It was closer, not in a way that made sense with distance or perspective, but in a way that made the sky feel smaller, like something vast was pressing down from above, compressing the space between us. The face was clearer than ever, and it was no longer still. The mouth stretched slightly, the edges pulling downward further than before, as if deepening the expression. The eyes, those dark hollow shapes, seemed to widen, not physically, but in presence, focusing, locking onto me. A sudden, violent pressure slammed into my head. I dropped to one knee with a gasp, my vision blurring at the edges. It felt like something was forcing its way into my thoughts, not reading them, but pushing against them, testing for weaknesses. Images flickered behind my eyes. Not memories, not dreams, places. Endless, empty landscapes under a sky filled with that same massive, watching face. Figures standing in the distance, all shaped like the thing walking toward me now, all facing upward, all perfectly still, waiting. The pressure increased. My hands flew to my head, fingers digging into my scalp, as if I could physically push it out. "Stop," I choked. "Just stop." The whispering turned into something sharper. Not words, but close. Close enough that my brain tried to translate it anyway. "Look back." The command wasn't spoken. It was placed, forced into me. I realized dimly that I had squeezed my eyes shut, that I had tried, even now, to break the connection, and it wasn't allowing it. Look back. My eyelids twitched. My body resisted. For a moment I thought I could fight it. Then the thing in front of me reached out. Its hand, long, pale, wrong, closed around my wrist. The contact was freezing. Not cold like ice, cold like absence, like something that had never known warmth. My eyes snapped open, and I looked straight at the moon. The world seemed to stretch, not physically, but perceptually. The distance between me and the sky collapsed in a way my mind couldn't process. The face filled everything. The clearing, the trees, the cabin behind me, all of it faded into insignificance compared to that vast, impossible presence. And then it changed. The frown deepened further, deeper than should have been possible, until it wasn't just an expression anymore. It was an opening. The mouth split, not wide, but enough. Enough to reveal something behind it. Darkness, not empty, moving. My breath hitched as the realization set in. It wasn't looking down at me. It was opening for me. The grip on my wrist tightened. The thing in front of me pulled, gently, almost carefully, and my body responded without my permission. My feet slid forward across the ground, leaving shallow trails in the dirt. "No," I whispered, but the word felt distant, disconnected. The world around me was fading. The trees blurred, the cabin dimmed, everything narrowing into that one point above, that one opening. I felt lighter, not physically, but internally, like something inside me was being peeled away in layers. Memories slipped first, small ones, then bigger ones. Faces, names. The feeling of who I was starting to thin, stretch, unravel. Panic flared, sharp and desperate. I grabbed onto the nearest thought I could. The note. Don't stare at the face on the moon after midnight. It wasn't just about looking. It was about what happened after. A rule without an ending, an incomplete warning. Unless, another thought broke through. If the moon was the source, what could interrupt it? My vision flickered. The darkness inside the mouth shifted, something vast moving just beyond perception. I didn't have time, didn't have options, so I did the only thing I could think of. I forced my gaze down, away from the moon, away from the face. The pressure spiked instantly, like something snapping tight inside my skull. Pain exploded behind my eyes, white hot and blinding. The grip on my wrist tightened further, bones creaking under the force. Look back. The command hit harder this time, angrier. I clenched my teeth and shook my head, a broken, desperate motion. No. The word came out raw, barely sound, but it was enough. For a second, just one, the pressure faltered. And in that gap, something else slipped through. Warmth. Faint at first, then growing. I didn't see where it came from. I didn't hear anything change, but I felt it. A second presence. Not above, not watching, but pushing back. The grip on my wrist loosened, just slightly. I tore my arm free and fell backward, scrambling away across the ground. I didn't look up again. I didn't dare. I kept my eyes fixed on the dirt, on the grass, on anything that wasn't the sky. The whispering turned sharp, fractured, like something breaking apart. A sudden flash of light washed over everything, bright enough to burn through my closed eyelids. Heat followed. Not painful, but overwhelming. Then, silence. Real silence. The kind that feels natural. I stayed where I was for a long time, breathing hard, afraid to move, afraid to look, afraid that if I did, it would all start again. Eventually, slowly, I lifted my head. The clearing was empty. The cabin stood quiet. The doorway open, no figure, no movement. And when I finally, carefully, let my eyes drift upward, the moon was just the moon. No face, no expression, just light. I didn't stay. I didn't pack. I got in my car and drove until the trees thinned and the road turned back into something normal, something real. I haven't gone back. I won't. But sometimes, late at night, I catch myself looking up without thinking. And every time I do, I remember the feeling. Not of being watched, but of being chosen. And I look away before it can see me again.